Welcome to the Blue Duck Fantasy Football Podcast.
All right, welcome to the Blue Duck Fantasy Football Podcast. This is our second podcast where we're going to go over divisions. So today we are going to be starting it off with the AFC East. So Matt, why don't you start it off with the Buffalo Bills?
Okay. Obviously, their quarterback, Josh Allen. His ADP is 169. He's quarterback 22 going off the board. I personally am actually okay with Josh Allen in two QBs for sure as a high-end second quarterback actually for me. Even though I got him ranked around 20, he's very in between with those 15 to 20 guys. I don't have him particularly lower than the rest of them. He's someone that I'm very good running up with as a second quarterback.
Yeah, I'd agree. He's definitely a good second quarterback to have, but he's not a one quarterback league starter. He's going to be boom or bust this week or this year, and he's going to have some good weeks, but I am not going to draft him. If you happen to play in a deeper league where you do have room to draft a second quarterback, where you're looking at 20-plus spots, where you're starting 7 and you have the bench is twice as big as your starting lineup, then by all means, you can take a flyer late on him in your draft. And if he does boom out this year and ends up being a top 10 guy, which is unlikely, but an outside possibility, then you have that. Moving on to wide receiver, Matt, why don't you give us some ADPs for this fantastic group of wide receiver talent that they have in Buffalo?
Oh, they are fantastic. You're correct. We've got John Brown, Cole Beasley, Robert Foster, and Zay Jones is the ones we're going to be talking about. John Brown is just inside wide receiver 60, going with the likes of Mecole Hardman and Paris Campbell. I would probably take the upside plays there, actually. Beasley, PPR, obviously much higher. He's just inside wide receiver 70, just inside wide receiver 100 with standard. Robert Foster, inside wide receiver 80 on standard and wide receiver 85 on PPR. Zay Jones, wide receiver just above wide receiver 80 in PPR and around wide receiver 70 for standard. Again, not really any of these guys I'm willing to have on my roster. Maybe John Brown as like a 5th or 6th wide receiver on my team.
Yeah, definitely not interested in any of these wide receivers. John Brown, no. Cole Beasley, no. Zay Jones, if you want to take a shot at him because you believe in him, by all means go for it. Same thing for Robert Foster. But with John Brown and Cole Beasley, they're past their prime and not going to add much value to fantasy. Moving on to tight end, we have the wonderful Tyler Kroft coming over from Cincinnati. Any chance you'll draft him in any leagues?
0%.
That's same as mine. Let's move on to the Miami Dolphins. Matt, why don't you give us the ADPs on the quarterbacks there?
Okay, so the quarterbacks here, Ryan Fitzpatrick and Josh Rosen, both going inside wide or quarterback 35. They're very close together. Fitzpatrick seems to have the inside track to the starting role there. Not somebody I'm even looking at even in super flex here or 2 quarterback leagues.
Yeah, I'd agree. The only value I see here is Josh Rosen in a dynasty league, and that's as your 3rd quarterback, if not your 4th quarterback. Not interested in any of these guys in 2019, but I am interested in one of these running backs here, namely Kalen Ballage. Why don't you give me the ADP on him to see where I'd have to draft him?
Okay, so Kalen Ballage, we are looking at around running back 45 in PPR formats, around running back 40 in standard if you want him. Going around the likes of Matt Breida. I would take him for sure over Breida. While we're at running backs, so I'll just give you the ADP on Kenyon Drake. He's just inside, he's just around running back 30 in both formats there.
Seems quite high for Kenyon Drake, a guy who's never really handled a full load and lost carries to Gore, was out-carried by Frank Gore last year. Just checking my running back rankings here on BlueDuckFantasy.com to see where I have Ballage, because I know I'm fairly high on him, and I think I have moved him past Drake. So I have him at 34th in standard, and you said he's going around 40.
Mm-hmm. So
that's probably somebody that I'm going to get a lot of shares of this year just because of where I have him ranked and where he's going. Whereas you said that Kenyon Drake was going at around 30, which seems to be where you have him ranked, but I have him much lower at about 40. So I'll be getting no Drake and a lot of Ballage, and I'm quite happy with that. Hopefully Ballage can take that job right out the gate and literally run away with it. Want to move on to wide receivers. This is not a group of players that I care much about, but I am curious to see how high they're being drafted.
Okay, so Devonta Parker, which obviously has the most upside of this group here, in my opinion anyway. Wide receiver just inside 70 for standard, just above wide receiver 70 for PPR, but right in that same group, being taken around the same area. Yeah,
That's late.
And yeah, it doesn't really make a ton of sense either because he seems like he'd be a lot more valuable in standard than PPR. Kenny Stills, who is reportedly on the trade block now, just above wide receiver 65 in both formats. These are the two wide receivers I'm looking at there. I'm willing to take a flyer on Parker still. Again, similar to John Brown, like a wide receiver 5. I'm not someone I want to have to put in my lineup, but if he does happen to go off, I'm okay with that. Best ball might be the safest play for Devonta Parker to me.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to Devonta Parker this year. He's another type of player which falls into that you draft him late, especially when they're going at wide receiver 70, so they're basically free at the end of your draft. You give them 2 weeks, they produce, or they're cut, and then you move on. Just a couple other names I'll mention here. Jakeem Grant, who signed an extension not too recently, is more of a kick returner, but had some explosive gadget plays last year, so someone they might try to incorporate more in the offense. Not someone I'd be drafting, but someone I might draft would be Albert Wilson, who was actually on pace to lead this team in receiving 2018 before he was hurt. And again, that'd be the same situation as Devonta Parker. It's a new coaching staff, so you don't really know what they're going to do. You have an extra spot at the end of your draft. You don't see anybody else you like. You see Albert Wilson or Devonta Parker. You pick which one you like most and give them 2 weeks and then moving on. And speaking of moving on, let's go on to tight end and Mike Gesicki. Where's he being drafted?
Just inside tight end 30. Again, it's a position where unlikely that you're going to have 30 tight ends drafted in your league. Gesicki does have some upside there. He's more of a dynasty play in my opinion. He's not really redraft. Going around Ian Thomas, Darren Waller, Cameron Brate, those kind of tight ends. None of them are likely being drafted. Again, I would go more dynasty than redraft league with him this year.
Yeah, I don't see much value with him unless you're in some type of league where 21 tight ends get drafted before you get to pick a tight end. You're probably not going to see his name too often. And you need to be in a deep enough league where it's worth drafting a backup tight end. So when we say that, we're talking like 20-plus size rosters and just like a regular starting, one quarterback, 2 wide receivers, 2 running backs, a tight end, and flex. And yeah, so not somebody I'm interested in. But this next team, the New England Patriots, do have some players I'm interested in. But let's start with Tom Brady, and let's see what his ADP has fallen to this year.
He is still being drafted as a starter in most leagues at quarterback 14. Inside quarterback 15 anyway. For his ADP at pick 115, he's being listed at here. Brady isn't somebody that I'm going to target as a quarterback here. He was actually on our quarterback avoids on BlueDuckFantasy.com. He's fine for, again, two QB super flex, but there are just so many quarterbacks this year I'd rather have above Brady, and I think my rankings will confirm that belief I have. While I look that up here, I'll pass it over to you, Ben.
Sure. While you look up your rankings on BlueDuckFantasy.com, I'll talk about Brady, who has gotten a little bit of a boost with Josh Gordon coming back, but even still doesn't crack the top 12 for me. Should be around top 15, but. And stop me if you've heard this before, quarterback's pretty deep this year. And I will be waiting on quarterback and just kind of taking whatever is left over. So if it happens to be Brady, sure. But he's not somebody I'm going to target. He's not somebody that I'm going to look for. He's going to fall to me. I'll take him if there's nobody else that I like more. But there are about 20 quarterbacks that I like this year. And I have him ranked 18. Just checking out my rankings on BlueDuckFantasy.com. Matt, where's your ranking?
I have him at quarterback 20 in the 4-point system here. That basically echoes what I just said about him. I'm ready to move on to running backs here.
Hit me.
3 names here. Sony Michel, James White, Damian Harris. Sony Michel and James White being drafted very close together. Around running back 25 in both formats here. James White carrying the steam that he had last year. He's being drafted really high in standard for me. Inside the top 30, I don't have him that high. Sony Michel, I think he's going to be improving on last year's numbers here. And I think this is way too low for him. I'm going to have a lot of shares of Sony Michel this year. Last player that there is Damian Harris, and he's being drafted around running back 50. He needs both of these guys to go down, or one of the two to go down before he's going to have any significant role this year.
Yeah, no interest in Damian Harris this year, even as a handcuff, because that situation would get murky with any type of injury. You said the ADP in James White wasn't much different from PPR and Standard?
Correct. There is one difference.
Yeah, so that's the mistake. He's clearly going too high in Standard if that's the case. Sonny Michel is somebody I really like this year in Standard. I have him ranked 17th, and you said he was going around 25?
Yes.
So definitely going to have a lot of shares of Sonny Michel myself. I guess I'll be fighting over him in drafts. But for PPR, just checking to see where I have James White here on BlueDogFantasy.com. All of our rankings are available there. Myself, Matt, and of course, Mr. Black.
Yeah, I'm definitely lowest on him in PPR. I've got him at 35. You have him at 25.
So I have him at 25, which you said was about where he was going in
Yeah.
PPR. So I think that's about fair value for me in PPR, but going way too high in Standard. So that's somebody I'll be looking to avoid. Now we get to Josh Gordon. Is there a harder player to rank in fantasy than this? I mean, he could be suspended tomorrow. Who knows what his role will be? He was okay last year. He wasn't amazing. What is his ADP now? It's been a while since he's been reinstated, so see what this says.
Yeah, I think it's still adjusting a little bit here, but he is being drafted around wide receiver 30 in standard formats. So he is being drafted typically as a starter in 3 wide receiver leagues, and being drafted just inside the top 40 here for PPR. That's kind of where I have him. He's just very difficult, like you just mentioned, to rank. When he's there, he's definitely effective, but there's no guarantees how long he's going to be there, if he's going to be there at all. I don't really know what else to say about Gordon, to be honest.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Even last year when he went to New England, we thought, wow, this is going to be perhaps, the next Randy Moss that Tom Brady had. And he really wasn't that. Like, he had some decent games, but he wasn't doing anything spectacular. And I don't expect him to do anything spectacular this year. I mean, he's barely played football for the past 3-4 years. So I have him ranked at 32. You said his ADP was around 30.
In standard, yeah.
In standard. He's better in standard than he is in PPR, that's for sure. But he's just not as exciting of a player as he was, 3-4 years ago. It's been so long, this saga just won't end. But let's move on away from Josh Gordon. Let's talk about Julian Edelman and the rookie there. What are the ADPs on them?
Okay, so for Julian Edelman, we've got him at inside the top 20 in both standard and PPR formats. He's actually a little bit higher in PPR, which makes sense for him. But he's just around that 15 mark. And for N'Keal Harry, which is the rookie you were just mentioning, he is just inside wide receiver 55 in both formats. Harry, again, he's more of a dynasty play for me this year. He might have up and down weeks just because that's just what happens in New England, that he might have a very good week one week and then have 0 catches for 0 yards the following week. Edelman used to be reliable. I've got him lower this year. I know you have him lower this year, but people still seem to be very on top of Julian Edelman, including Mr. Black.
Yeah, I was just looking at the rankings here in standard. You said he's going around top 20 in standard, which seems to be ridiculously high. I know he was very good and very consistent last year, but now you've added the rookie. You've added Josh Gordon, who was there part of the year last year. Yeah, sure, you lost Gronk, but Brady's going back down. He's regressing. I'm probably going to be staying away from Julian Edelman. He's not a player that I dislike. I do have him ranked 30th in PPR, but I have a lot of guys ahead of him because I just don't see this. He's getting older. He's not a player I'm interested in. He's not a bad player. I just think his ADP at 20 is quite high. As for the rookie, at this point with Gordon coming in, the only way I'm taking a shot on him is if it's one of my late round picks and I'm just looking for a high upside play. And I'm fingers crossed that Josh Gordon will be suspended. Now, of course, I'm not hoping for Josh Gordon to get suspended, but that possibility has to come into your head when you draft N'Keal Harry. The last player I will mention here at wide receiver before we move on to the exciting tight end that they have is Demaryius Thomas, who, if he was on a different team, I'd be looking at him as another one of those 2-week guys. But in New England, you never know what they're going to do week to week. So drafting him and seeing, what's he going to do in 2 weeks, isn't going to tell you anything, so he's somebody I'm just avoiding in drafts. And somebody else I'm avoiding in drafts is the starting tight end for New England.
Ben Watson.
Ben Watson.
And that appears to be almost everybody's thoughts on Ben Watson. Something you don't really see a ton in tight end is a huge gap in where they're being drafted in the different formats, but there is such here. He's being drafted inside the top 30 in PPR and inside the top 45 for standard, obviously, but neither of those are positions of relevance, but I just thought it was interesting, so I thought I'd throw that in there.
I'm going to throw a hypothesis on why that is. He's being drafted so little in leagues that for some reason a certain group of people have drafted him in the one league where he's higher, so that's why he's going higher. Because if he's not being drafted, he has to be ranked somewhere. But either way, not somebody to look forward to drafting. Ben Watson should be avoided. But let's talk about the Jets. Sam Darnold, what's the ADP on the second-year QB?
He is going as quarterback number 25. That seems about right to me for him. He's somebody I'm okay with as a second quarterback again in flex, super flex, or 2 QB leagues. Preferably you want him as a backup, but there is upside there. The Jets' offense will be a little bit better than it was last year. They're going to have a little bit more balance as well with Le'Veon Bell, but Le'Veon Bell is also a very good pass catcher. So, again, he's going to be throwing quite a bit. They're going to be behind, too.
Yeah, I could definitely see him taking a step forward this year, but it's not somebody I'm excited about in a one-quarterback league. But you did mention Le'Veon Bell, which is somebody that everybody wants to know about. So why don't we go into him and talk about his ADP right now? His
ADP is just outside the top 5 running backs at running back number 6 in both standard and PPR. And he's currently being picked at number 7 overall. So I'm going to say DeAndre Hopkins is the only guy in between him and a top 6 pick there. He's going right around the guys that you'd expect: Connor, Chubb, Mixon, Gurley. I would take him and Mixon are very close for me. I'm going to verify which one I prefer more, but I believe in PPR I'm going to have Le'Veon, and in standard I'm going to have
just looking at your rankings here on Blue Duck Fantasy. Their standard rankings, you actually have Le'Veon Bell 6th, Mixon is 7th, and Connor is 8th.
Okay,
So I guess you have him ahead of him in PPR as well.
Yeah.
I'm not quite as high. I have him 9th. It's not that I'm not high. It's just that I think he presents one of the biggest risks of all the running backs you're looking at here, with the exception of Todd Gurley. But we kind of know what's going on there. And, of course, Melvin Gordon and Ezekiel Elliott, who still haven't signed to this date. But Le'Veon Bell is going from a very good offense, a very good offensive line, where he was able to run his little peekaboo-style running to the Jets line, who, sure, they added a new center. Was it center from Carolina that had retired that showed up? Yeah. Regardless, if this doesn't work, it could be absolutely terrible. But he'll still have PPR value. So I am worried about how well he's going to run, but I have no concerns about how well he's going to pass catch. Any other running backs that we should talk about here?
Ty Montgomery seems to be the handcuff. If you are going to take a handcuff here, he's the second back. It looks like he leapfrogged Elijah McGuire, yeah. He's going around running back 65, so if you're one of those people that wants a cuff, which Bell, you actually may want to do that just because he's been away for a year, you can get him right at the end of your draft to 246 and 204 is his position that he's being drafted in respectively.
Yeah, I'm not big on cuffing, but there are a few players that I would cuff. And if I'm drafting Le'Veon Bell with a first-round pick, I'm guaranteed to be cuffing him because you never know what's going to happen with this situation. He's been off a year. His body might not be ready to take the hits. That can happen. Or he could be as fresh as he's ever been and run over everybody. So a lot of risk, a lot of upside, a lot of downside. Let's move on to the wide receivers. And start with Robbie Anderson, a guy who I really like. What's his ADP?
He is being drafted very similarly in both formats of standard and PPR, around wide receiver number 30. Seems pretty appropriate for him, actually. Being drafted around the likes of Josh Gordon, talked about him already, and Allen Robinson. I would take Robinson ahead of Anderson here. Gordon and Anderson are very similar to me. I take Robbie Anderson ahead of him, though.
I like Robbie Anderson this year in standard. I have him as almost a top 25 player. I'm just checking my ranking here on BlueDuckFantasy.com to see where I have him in PPR, and I haven't dropped him that much, which is a bit surprising. I have him at 28, So as you said, he was going around the top 30. So definitely good value in either format. Should be good for over 1,000 yards this year. The catch numbers won't be overly high. Maybe 60, 70 would be a good guess. And the touchdowns will kind of be sporadic. But definitely a player who could crack into the top 25, even maybe the top 20, depending on how much Sam Darnold improves, and how much Le'Veon Bell helps the passing game here. Couple other guys on this team. Matt, why don't you let us know who they are and where they're going?
So Jamison Crowder is another guy that's going to be taking targets. He's more of a high-volume play. He at least used to be able to see how the Jets use him, but that's also kind of the reason with Anderson. He's not going to see a ton of catches likely. But anyway, Crowder is obviously he's going just above wide receiver number 16 PPR, below that, but still in the top 65 in standard formats. Not something I have a ton of interest. I maybe grab him as a flyer towards the end of my draft here. And Quincy Enunwa isn't being drafted. He's later than wide receiver 80 in both formats here. Not really somebody else I'm interested in.
Yeah, so something I'll just keep repeating. Guys like this are 2-week players. They're not rookies. They're not developing. You kind of know what they have. It just depends on how their team is going to use them. So if you're in a deeper draft and you're looking to grab some possible upside talent that's going to bang, it's going to either hit or miss, you're going to know within 2 weeks with these guys what their role is. So if you're in a deep enough league where these guys are there and you want them, then by all means have at them. If not, if you find better players, then go with them. Anything else to add on that, or shall we go to the tight end?
We'll go to the tight end with Chris Herndon. Would be drafted higher, obviously, if it wasn't for this 4-game suspension that is coming in on him. He's being drafted just outside the top 20 tight ends. I would suspect that number would have been around 15-ish if he wasn't being suspended for the first 4 games. I'm personally not taking a tight end that is not playing the first 4 games.
Yeah, I agree. And even our mock draft that we did, we were down to tight end number 22 before we got one. And whoever we took, we just thought, if this doesn't work out, we can grab Chris Herndon come after suspension is over. So not somebody you should be drafting in any league, and just kind of grab somebody else. And if you're weak at tight end, somebody to maybe prioritize even the week before he comes back and make sure you get him. That's going to wrap it up for the AFC East team preview kind of review. So moving on, we will be going to the NFC East, and we're going to be starting with the Dallas Cowboys and former Rookie of the Year, Dak Prescott.
Dak Prescott, somebody I'm personally on avoiding this year, and I believe he was on the quarterback avoids as well. But anyhow, he is being drafted at QB number 18, pick 132. Again, when we're saying avoiding, we're saying avoid in your standard 1 quarterback format. Dak is somebody you can use as a back end quarterback number 2 if it's super flex or 2 QB, or preferably backup, but you're not going to get him at that point. The Zeke situation there, obviously if Zeke does not end up coming into play here, then he's going to move even further down.
Yeah, it's interesting. Some teams, if a running back isn't there, you expect the quarterback to throw more, which kind of was the case last year with Roethlisberger without Bell. Like, Connor did a great job, but they threw a whole lot more. This is a situation where Zeke, the offense runs through Zeke. So without him, Dak is going to struggle. Cooper is going to struggle because he's going to see a lot more coverage. So I think he's going at 18, as you said. He's top 25 at best without Zeke. I don't mind him being higher even than 18 if Ezekiel Elliott does sign it and come back. But as of right now, Ezekiel Elliott has not signed. So why don't we talk about him?
Zeke, even though he hasn't signed or reported, it looks like we still have a lot of faith that he is going to be coming. He's being drafted as running back number 4, so obviously inside the top 5, and 4th overall as his ADP. Somebody I'm still comfortable doing that. I remain confident that this is going to get resolved. He may not be that great in week 1, given that he hasn't reported yet, but overall I think he's going to be somebody that's you're not going to be disappointed with if you take him in the high end of the first round there.
Yeah, I moved him down to 5 from 4 in my rankings, just behind David Johnson. And I want to clear up one thing about Ezekiel Elliott. People say he's not a great PPR back compared to the other guys. That might have been true up until last year when he caught 70-plus balls. So he's a dual threat running back now. if and when he signs a contract with the Cowboys. But if and when he doesn't sign a contract with the Cowboys, seem to be Tony Pollard would be the guy to step up if Zeke is not there. Where's he going? What's his ADP?
He is in between that running back 50 to 55 range. That's where he's being taken. 158 and 147 in PPR and standard respectively. Obviously, a lot of value if Zeke's there. If Zeke is not there. If Zeke is there, very little value. Zeke barely comes off the field. Like you said, he's turned into a dual threat running back. For now, I'm taking Pollard near the end of the draft if he's there, especially if you have Elliott in the top in the first round there. Yeah,
I think if you draft Zeke Elliott with him missing most of training camp, although he's been working hard and getting in shape, you have to grab Tony Pollard because all indications is that he is the do-all bell cow back if he gets hurt. There isn't a committee behind him. So anytime you get a situation where you are using a first-round pick on a player and you have a for sure handcuff that's going to get all the touches if he gets hurt, you have to take him. The value you said was between 55 and 60, which is about where I have him ranked here. The closer we get to the season without Zeke signing, the more he's going to go up. So the later you're drafting or the earlier you're drafting, the cheaper he's going to be. If you draft Zeke, you have to get Tony Pollard. If you are weak at running back, Tony Pollard represents a lot of upside. And again, not that he's a you'll know 1 or 2 weeks guy. You'll know before the season starts or before week 1 whether or not he's going to be the guy. So, not much else to say about him there other than the fact that he had over 70 carries in college last year, which was twice what he had in the 2 years prior, which he had 30-something. So he's never really carried the ball as a bell cow back, so I don't know where this faith comes from, but they got faith, so I will listen to them, and I will draft him about where he's going. Move on to wide receivers. Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and Randall Cobb. Why don't you hit me with some ADPs?
Okay. AC, Amari Cooper going just inside wide receiver 15 for both formats there. Being drafted around the likes of Stephon Diggs, Brandon Cooks. T.Y. Hilton is there. I feel like that's going to change with some recent news about his quarterback situation. But anyway, around pick 30 in PPR and a little bit later, actually, around pick 35 in standard is where Amari Cooper is going. I have him a little bit higher in both formats. Michael Gallup between wide receiver 55 to 60 range between in standard and PPR. And Randall Cobb higher in PPR. He's just inside wide receiver 70, just above wide receiver 80 in standard. Cobb isn't someone I'm taking. Gallup I'll take a flyer on. There is some talent there, and Cooper will be drawing a majority of the attention from the opposing defenses. Again, this is more of a Dak thing for me that I just don't trust him a whole lot, so I'm not big on more than just the big name wide receiver here.
I think Gallup might be the only person who would benefit from Ezekiel Elliott not returning in terms of fantasy because the coverage would be drawn to Amari Cooper, which would mean Dak wouldn't be able to look that way, which would make him forced to look to Michael Gallup. So I don't mind Michael Gallup where he's going. He has talent, as you mentioned. He was one of my favorites coming in last year. He has the talent, and he was in a good position, so I liked him. Randall Cobb, PPR only, but other than that, I'm probably going to pass. Amari Cooper, I think, will struggle. We've seen Amari Cooper be great. We've seen Amari Cooper be bad. We just haven't seen him be bad on the Cowboys yet. So if there is no running game and he gets the type of coverage that I'm sure he was seeing in Oakland, you might see him struggle, and he might be somebody who turns into a bust this year. This is a bust warning that I'm giving you. I don't think he's a bust, but I have him ranked 12 right now. And some of the names that I have above him, Antonio Brown, Keenan Allen, Kenny Golladay. I'll probably move Diggs above him. Definitely not T.Y. Hilton. And Brandon Cooks possibly as well, as long as this Zeke situation is in progress. If Zeke comes back, then I'll happily move him up because I think he'll be great with Zeke in the lineup. Does this team have a tight end? Do they have an announcer that's a tight end?
They do have a tight end that spent last year in the announcing booth.
Was it Boogie? In the Boogie Mabo?
No, it was not. It was not Booger McFarland.
Oh, I thought they got rid of that machine, so I figured he came back and played football.
No, it is now Jason Witten, of course. Thankfully, he is out of the broadcast booth. I don't know how many people enjoyed him there. But anyway, not too many people are that excited about him in fantasy, and of course there's probably a good reason for that. Being drafted around tight end 20 to 25 in both standard and PPR. This obviously puts him outside of starter format, starting in any sort of format unless you've got some sort of 2 tight end league. Not somebody I'm interested in this year. We didn't even talk about him at all in that recent mock draft. I think he was probably there, but it's not somebody that I'm looking at.
No, and he won't be a full-time tight end like he was in the past. He'll maybe be the lead tight end, but he won't see the type of snap numbers that he used to see when he was there. There are other tight ends there, none of whom you should be interested in. This is just a situation where you just pass. Maybe he fills in a bye week for you, and hopefully he has a good game that week. But other than that, let's talk some Giants. Starting out quarterback, there's a couple guys here. Eli Manning, Daniel Jones. Where are they being drafted, and who's being drafted first? I'm interested.
Which one do you think is being drafted first?
I think Daniel Jones is being drafted ahead of Eli Manning.
You are not correct, sir. It's Eli. Eli is being drafted inside the top 30. Daniel Jones is outside the top 30. People, I guess, are going from the more of a sure thing to at least start the season is Eli. Daniel Jones has been doing quite well in the preseason, so people are maybe going to start buying that hype, and maybe this will flip-flop. As right now, it's Eli. Not somebody I'm really looking at either league, especially for redraft. Of course, in Dynasty or some sort of keeper format where you can keep a lot of players, Daniel Jones may be somebody you want to look at.
I think regardless of who the quarterback is for this team, the quarterback won't be fantasy relevant. It's not that Daniel Jones isn't good and probably isn't. He's probably better than Eli Manning already, but I just don't think that in his first year he will be a fantasy-worthy quarterback to start, barring some type of 2-quarterback league or perhaps some type of bye week replacement 1 week. He's not somebody I'm interested in. And Eli Manning, we know what we're getting there, and it's not fantasy-worthy. So let's move on to somebody who is a little bit more fantasy-worthy. Saquon Barkley, is this guy good?
He is. He's pretty good.
I'm going to guess his ADP right now. 1? Is it 1?
It is 1 in standard.
Is it not 1 in PPR?
It is actually 1 in PPR.
Number one. I've come back around. I have him at number 1. Where do you have him ranked?
Also number 1. I don't think there's a lot more to say about Saquon, to be honest. He's a do-all back. Would you grab a cuff in this situation? I wouldn't.
No, there is no clear cuff here. It's unfortunate. There'd probably be some type of committee with Gallman and Perkins. And is Orleans Darkwa still there? Because maybe he'll come out and play as well. Saquon Barkley, the number 1 pick of every draft. Don't get cute. Yeah, there's not much else to say. Let's move on to wide receivers. Sterling Shepard, is he going to be ready for week 1, you think?
I think he's going to be ready for week 1. It sounds like he's going to be ready. They've been holding him out in the preseason so far, but I don't have any concerns about his availability. Being drafted between wide receiver 35 and 40, it's about right for him. He's being drafted around the living legend Larry Fitzgerald and Cortland Sutton. I would probably take him above Fitzy there. Sutton is quite close for me. This is somebody that, again, I'm not taking him as someone I'm going to plug in every week. He's more of a bye week fill-in. Golden Tate, suspended first 4 weeks. He's being drafted around the wide receiver 50 mark. Again, that's somebody that's just below Shepard and is going to be more of a bye week fill-in, obviously post week 4.
Yeah, I have Sterling Shepard at 28 here. This would be the standard rankings. So I am fairly high on him this year, especially with the Golden Tate injury to start the season. I think it's him and Evan Ingram and Barkley to catch passes, but there's no wide receivers after Sterling Shepard that are overly interested about. I do like Sutton more. Big Sutton fan this year. Sterling Shepard should be ahead of him in PPR. Sterling Shepard could catch close to 100 balls this year. He is better in PPR. He does a lot of good stuff in short yardage. So if he's going at around the top 30, sorry, yeah, I'm at what, 30?
He's going in PPR. He's above wide receiver 35, actually.
Wow. So yeah, I'll probably be getting a fair bit of Sterling Shepard if he's going at around that, especially in PPR. In standard, I'm assuming he's going around the same spot.
Slightly lower than that, about wide receiver 40.
I'll probably be getting him plenty there as well. Golden Tate, interesting. We just took him in a mock draft that we did simply because we were so strong at wide receiver, and you're getting him at a discount now. So if you're good at wide receiver to start the season and you won't need anybody till the bye weeks come in, then he's a fantastic get, and he'll just come in and play a couple bye weeks for you. better in PPR as well. That's about all I have for the wide receivers. The tight end, Evan Ingram, somebody who I like and was one of my targets. He's my 4th tight end, and he's after the big 3 of Ertz, Kelsey, and Kittle. And Matt, where's his ADP, and where do you have him ranked on BlueDuckFantasy.com?
He's being drafted as tight end number 5 in both standard and PPR formats for me on BlueDuckFantasy.com. I have him as my tight end number 6 actually in standard formats behind, of course, the top 3, Hunter Henry and O.J. Howard. And in PPR, I have him as number 5, so I'm right in line with the people on that one. Not a lot to say about Ingram. He's going to be the top target likely in passing situations, and maybe outside of Saquon Barkley, which is kind of funny to say the running back might be the top top receiving target. But regardless of the quarterback situation there, I think he's going to have quite a bit of value this year, obviously being ranked as in the top 6 tight ends for both formats for myself. Again, I don't have a ton to say about Ingram. Was great when Beckham was there. He was better when he was out, actually.
Ingram, Hunter Henry, O.J. Howard, part of that second group of tight ends. I know you really like Hunter Henry, so why you would have him behind there. I really like Evan Ingram. It's kind of pick who you like at that spot. The Barkley will probably lead them in receptions. Same with Le'Veon Bell will probably lead the Jets in reception as well. But let's move on here. Philly, and somebody I know you like at quarterback, one of your targets, Carson Wentz.
Carson Wentz, yeah, he's a target for me. Partially because of his ADP being a little bit lower. He's quarterback 9, but just partially because he did it as recently as 2 years ago. He was on target to be, I believe, quarterback number 2 or 3. I don't have the numbers right in front of me.
I think it was 2.
He was on pace for that. No reason he can't be doing that again, in my opinion. I've got him as quarterback number 6. I feel like he's being taken too low. In quarterback format, in quarterback wise, not the overall ADP. I'm still a fan of waiting there, but if you can get him around round 8, 9, I'm good with that.
Right. So the way you look at him is there's about a dozen quarterbacks from, say, 8 to 20, somewhere in that range, that are all kind of grouped together, and you're high on him, so you have him above that group. Mm-hmm. So that group that you'd wait till the double-digit rounds to take, you'd be willing to take Carson Wentz in an earlier round. I'm not that high on Carson Wentz simply because of the injury history, and I group him with that second grouping of quarterbacks, and he's not somebody that I would reach for in those earlier rounds, but that's fine. We'll move on to running back unless you have something else to say about your boy Carson Wentz.
Nope.
Okay. I'm interested about the ADP on Howard and Sanders because the way I see it is Jordan Howard will start off the season getting most of the touches, and Miles Sanders will most likely end the season getting most of the touches. So what's the ADP?
Do you have any care to venture a guess on which one actually is going first in formats?
I think they're close. I'm going to go with Jordan Howard is ahead of him in standard, and Miles Sanders is one spot ahead of him in PPR.
Okay. Well, Miles Sanders is going ahead of him in both formats, actually. So you're right on the PPR. A little bit of a gap, not a huge. Sanders is going around running back 30 for both standard and PPR formats. Howard just below running back 35, actually, so there's a little bit of a gap, not huge. Again, this is going to be something that you're going to have to watch the situation and how Philly is using them. Early on in the season, you'll get a good idea which running back is the one to own. Of course, that could flip. Miles Sanders could obviously take more carries from Howard. I don't see it going reverse. I don't see Sanders being the top guy early in the season and then them going back to Howard. I don't think that would happen. So if they're going Sanders right away, then Howard is no more than like a cuff almost.
In my rankings here on BlueDuckFantasy.com, I have Jordan Howard 35 in standard and Miles Sanders 37. I would assume Jordan Howard drops a bit in PPR and Miles Sanders might move it a little bit above him. But these are players that I'm not overly interested in just because you might think you have something and then it's just going to kind of go away. Like I have Kalen Ballage ahead of them, which is it's kind of a similar situation where there are two backs. And we haven't really seen one do it. We've seen the other one kind of do it. Although Jordan Howard is a lot more proven than Kenyon Drake. A couple 1,000-yard seasons. I believe he was at about 900 last year. Don't quote me on that, though, for sure. I wouldn't mind getting Jordan Howard in the standard if I'm weak at running back and I've missed the first 3 or 4 rounds. What was the pick number he was going at?
Jordan Howard, 85 in standard and 90 in PPR.
Okay. So yeah, it'd be somebody that I'd be open to taking if I'm strong at wide receiver and weak at running back, just because I know I'm going to be getting something early, and I'll be able to kind of filter through the waiver wire to grab some players that are moving on up after that. That's enough for the running backs, unless you have something to add. Wide receiver time. Alshon Jeffrey. What do you think about him this year?
The safest of this group. Again, not a strong wide receiver fantasy group here, but Alshon should be taken as a starter in majority of leagues this year. He's being drafted as such right now. He's wide receiver 26, and we're just going to say between wide receiver 25 and 30 for standard and PPR, because give or take for every auction or draft is going to be a little bit different here. He's being drafted around the likes of Allen Robinson, Will Fuller. Again, Robinson I've got higher. I've got him above. I've got Jeffrey above Will Fuller. Jeffrey's just one of those guys that just seems like he's got a very high floor. If I'm going to take an Eagles receiver, that's who it's going to be. Deshaun Jackson is like a best ball guy to me. Aguilar I'm not really taking, and I'm not really looking at the rookie there, Arcega-Whiteside.
Yeah, I like Alshon this year for one reason. The way his 2018 season ended, with him dropping that pass, like that's going to light a fire under somebody, especially his age. He's a veteran. He's not old, but you could get bored of playing football, if you don't get anything. But now you've cost your team, a chance in the playoffs, and I'm sure he's going to come in motivated. I have him as a top 25 wide receiver in standard, and I'm sure I'm not that far off of him, off of that in PPR. And you said he was going around what pick? 30? After 25? He's
going, between wide receiver 25 and 30.
Yeah, so he doesn't present major upside value to me. But if you are looking for your third wide receiver in a flex league, in a PPR league, or as your flex in a PPR league, I think he's a fantastic get there. Not much else to say about him. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, I've seen the tape. Guy looks like a tight end. It really controls his body well. I don't think there will be enough balls to go around for him this year. You have him in Dynasty. He definitely could be something. And he may develop as the season goes on. Deshaun Jackson tends to start seasons hot and then cool off as they go on. And Aguilar is basically going to be a PPR guy if he even has a role this year. So I'm probably not going to be drafting Whiteside just because I'm going to be waiting too long for him. But in a deeper league where there is room on the bench, he's definitely not a bad grab. Speaking of not bad grabs, how about tight end Zach Ertz?
Not a ton to say about Ertz just because he is so good. He is being drafted right around where you'd think, in the top 3 in both formats. Kittle and Kelsey, obviously the 2 other names involved in that mix. PPR, he's going almost a full round, it looks like, ahead of in standard in pick 24 versus 33. Yeah, I mean, I'm not huge on grabbing tight ends early. I know that these guys have a significant upside over the next group of tight ends. What it would appear, personally, I like Hunter Henry to approach these guys, but anyhow, I don't see him getting quite the amount of catches that he did this year. That's partially Dallas Goedert and just a couple of the other names that you just mentioned on wide receiver. But again, top 3 tight end for me in both formats. I really can't see anybody ranking that any differently.
Yeah, top 3 tight end easily in both formats. I don't see how somebody could have him at 4. He's proven. Did he break the catch record? Is that what he broke last year? There's so many tight end records broken last year by the 3 guys. There's the risk of Goddard taking some more targets from this year, especially with this being a playoff team where they want to not get their guys injured. So if there's no need to have them out there more than they need to, they probably won't. So there is that risk in fantasy. Dallas Goedert, if you're going to cuff a tight end, I mean, there's no better situation than Dallas Goedert for Zach Ertz. So if you're taking Ertz in the late second, early third, is that about where he's going?
Yeah, right there.
And that would be the earliest I would take him, would be the early third round. You're going to need to get Dallas Goedert. If you don't have Zach Ertz, there's no reason why you should get Dallas Goedert.
Outside of Dynasty or something.
Yeah, outside of a Dynasty league. In a standard redraft or PPR redraft league, you're not going to be looking at Dallas Goedert unless you somehow play in one of those leagues that I've never seen before that starts 2 tight ends. Anyways, on to Washington and the quarterback carousel there, starting with Case Keenum.
Case Keenum, quarterback number 36. People are not picking him as the starter in that situation. They are picking Dwayne Haskins or Haskins. Just inside quarterback number 30. That's where the belief is. I don't know. I think Keenum will probably end up being the starter week 1. It's not somebody I'm taking anyway. Same with Haskins. I'm not taking either quarterback out of Washington. I just don't like this whole offense to begin with, but definitely not taking the quarterback there, even in a super flex 2-quarterback format.
Who do you think led this team in receiving last year?
Boy, that's a good question, actually. I didn't really think about that. I'm going to say, well, it's not going to be Reed. I can't even think about it. Who led this team in receiving yards?
I'm pretty sure it was Reed. I'm just double-checking right now. But, yeah, I believe it was Jordan Reed, which shows you how bad this team was last year. Jordan Reed, 558 reception yards.
Wow.
Josh Doctson had 532 on 10 less catches and 6 less targets. Crowder was actually 3rd on the team for as little as he did and how big of a bust he was. Wow. Yeah. Here's the bigger stat about the Washington team. They were 7-9 last year. Their points for was 281. That ranked them 29th. So they went 7-9 with the 29th scoring offense. This is a team that likes to run the ball. It's a team that likes to play defense. And I'm not overly interested in whoever the quarterback is. I don't care if it's Keenum. I don't care if it's Colt McCoy. I don't care if it's Dwayne Haskins. I don't care. This team doesn't have the weapons for any of those guys to be successful. Running backs is a different story. I am interested in some of the running backs here. So why don't we get some ADPs on Geis and Peterson at least?
Okay, so we'll go with Darius Geis first here. Obviously the one that's being taken above Peterson. He is being drafted between running back 30 and 35 in both formats. You're looking at guys like Latavius Murray here, Rashad Penny. I would take Geis over those 2 characters there. And Adrian Peterson, a little bit lower, obviously, between running back 50 or 45 to 50 in standard there and just above 50 in PPR. Geis is the more intriguing pick to me. There's obviously more upside here, but AP showed us last year the guy can still get it done, and I'm fine with taking Peterson as like a 4th running back on my team, 5th running back on my team, because if Geis can't carry the load, I think this is probably going to be a timeshare for most of the year, honestly. Geis might start getting a little bit more if he is proving to be healthy, but no reason to not take Adrian Peterson towards the later rounds in your draft, but not super late.
Yeah, like you mentioned, this is most likely going to be some type of a committee. It'll be like a 1A, 1B, where Darius Geis is probably going to lead the backfield in touches, but it won't be by much. You could see a week where one guy gets 13 and the other guy gets 10. And there's also Chris Thompson there, who will probably have some third down duties as a pass-catching back. He looked great to start the season last year and looked absolutely horrible after he came back from the injury. So if he's healthy, he's somebody in PPR late in a deeper league that you can grab. Sorry, the ADP again on Peterson was?
He is going between running back 45 and 50 in standard and just after 50 in PPR.
Yeah, any team that needs depth at running back, which is going to be pretty much every team this year, should be looking at him well above that. I have him ranked 36 in standard. Matt, you have him 38 here, going off the BlueDuckFantasy.com rankings. As for Geis, I have him at 27, and you have him at 28. Seems that you've just been copying my rankings and then sending them over. So maybe stop doing that and come up with your own rankings. All right? But let's talk some wide receivers, unless you got something else to add on the running backs. Wide receivers are blank. There's really nobody here. What was the highest ADP?
The highest ADP was Kelvin Harmon in standard at wide receiver 76. That's the highest on that whole team. Yeah, basically what Ben said. There isn't a wide receiver here. Ignore the whole group, honestly. Like there's no reason to take any of these guys.
Kelvin Harmon's a rookie receiver who's more of a possession receiver, so should have a higher floor, but he's not going to have a high ceiling. He's not going to be any type of difference maker for your fantasy team. So let's go on to the best receiver on this team then, Jordan Reed. What's his ADP?
Jordan Reed being drafted just outside of tight end number 15 in standard and just inside in PPR formats. Someone I'm okay taking as my starting tight end if it's falling right at the end of the draft here. Typically I'm going to wait on my tight ends, which we've talked about a few times already. And given that there's just like we said, nobody else to catch passes here, I will take Jordan Reed at the end of a draft as my starting tight end.
I believe Jordan Reed is currently in concussion protocol. Not sure if you're aware of that.
Actually, I did see that yesterday.
Yeah, so he's a player that up until then I was like, yeah, if you're looking for somebody with high upside, he's the guy. And then you remember why this is the type of player who has such high upside and never delivers. It's because he can't stay healthy. Even looking here on Google, the first thing after I type in Jordan Reed news is Luck's retirement should have Jordan Reed pondering his future. But anyways, Reed is a high upside play. If you whiff on tight end, take him. And if he gets injured, you'll just be trolling the waiver wire for a replacement tight end. But definitely not somebody you're targeting to get as your starting tight end in fantasy football this year. That's going to do it for this last team in the NFC East. Matt, anything you have to add before we go?
Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching us.
That's it.